Hello, and welcome to Archive Magic, a deck tech channel built around vintage 60s and Commander. Our group is a very casual group, and we have plenty of decks that we can build. We have our power types, we have our basic types, and we also have the check this shit out types. But for today, I want to show you this deck.
Today, I want to build for you one of the first builds for this season's decks, and I call it the Adventures of Eldraine. This is part of my 60 vintage, and it's a June build, green, red, black, and obviously from the name, it was heavily influenced from the two Eldraine sets, Wilds of Eldraine and Throne of Eldraine. I was fascinated by the adventuring aspect introduced here, and I wanted to create a full deck around it and bring it back. To start us off, let's throw in the cards that truly inspired this deck. First is 4 copies of Lucky Clover, and an artifact costing 2 colorless, which reads, whenever you cast an adventure, instant, or sorcery spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. To help support the theme further, I've also included 4 copies of Edgewall Innkeeper, a 1/1 creature that costs a single green, which reads, whenever you cast a creature spell that has adventure, draw a card. It doesn't need to have gone through an adventure first. With both of these, having the main theme of the deck being played, I will be able to capitalize on better resourcing and further use of the adventuring cards. Alright, now that the theme is established, let's look into the core of the deck. First, let's start off with the simple and quick plays we have in tow. First is 3 copies of Curious Pair, a 1/3 creature costing 1 and a green, while on its own, it's a vanilla with no abilities. Its adventure is called Treats to Share. For a single green mana at sorcery speed, you create a food token. They aren't much, but when you need a quick resource at simple costs, these are great starts. Sticking with the simple quick drop is 3 copies of Embereth's Shieldbreaker, a 2/1 costing 1 and a red. Like before, it's a creature with no abilities, but its adventure is called Battle Display. For a single red mana at sorcery speed, you can destroy target artifact. While it is a shame that it is limited to only artifacts, with the Lucky Clover, both of these are able to be doubled and are quick pop spells that can allow us to draw more cards to get to our next plays faster. Another quick low to the ground creature spell included in this deck are 3 copies of Foulmire Knight, a 1/1 creature costing a single black mana with the ability of Death Touch. This zombie knight is a great defender deterrent, and with the adventure of Profane Insight, he can be a card draw opportunity too. For 2 and a black, it reads, you draw a card and lose 1 life. While we do not have much life gain in this deck, the Treats to Share from before can help balance out the cost if necessary, as food tokens, cost 2, tap, give 3 life. The same can be said with our next creature of Mosswood Dreadknight. Only 1 of him resides in this deck, and at the cost of a single green, this 3/2 human knight comes into the battlefield with the ability of Trample, and reads, when this creature dies, you may cast it from your grave as an adventure until the end of your next turn. His adventure, though, similar to Fortune Knight, is cheaper. For 1 and a black, Dread Whispers can be cast at sorcery speed. Draw 1 card and lose 1 life. For a death recursion tactic that is nice to have. But decks need some type of power or push to make them have that much more of a punch. That's where these next couple cards come in. Callous Sellsword will start us off in this category. This 2/2 human soldier, where I have 3 copies of, only costs 1 and a black mana. His ability reads, this creature enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature that died under your control this turn. Though this deck isn't heavily themed in sacrifice, this creature's adventure cost will cause that desired tactic. At a cost of a single red mana, Burn Together is a sorcery speed spell, reading, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target. Then sacrifice it, so we can send out a quick platoon of all our small minion creatures from earlier and ahead. If they hit the player, great. If they don't, oh look, we can hit him again. And then with each creature dying on our side, Callous Sellsword will enter in that much bigger. Though we can grow our creature's power in other ways as well. For instance, there's 3 copies of Picnic Ruiner, a 2/2 Goblin Rogue at the cost of 1 and a red. Its ability reads, whenever this creature attacks, while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, this creature gains double strike. but most of the creatures within don't have that type of power. So it would seem useless, right? That is until you look over at the adventure spell of Stolen Goodies. Costing 3 and a green, this sorcery reads, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. The nice part of how this reads, he provides enough counters that even the curious pair can become strong enough to trigger him. Never underestimate the small early plays. Further power can be found with this next creature, Questing Druid. Costing 1 and a green, this 1/1 creature is the only copy within this deck. Between his adventure and his own abilities, he is a perfect for any point in this game. His own ability reads as follows. Whenever you cast a spell that is white, blue, black, or red, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. For a 2-drop early where it can grow quickly off of a majority of this deck, it is phenomenal. Especially when the adventure spells themselves count as separate spells for this to trigger. So you can get a double trigger from the same card in these instances. But for his adventure, Seek the Beast, an instant spell costing 1 in red, works great when you're sitting on excess mana and a little in hand. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until your next end step, you may play those cards. From here, we can just grab more and more cards to play and bounce out as we need. As for the bigger boys finishing up this deck, we have starting off with the pair of Two-Headed Hunter, a 5/4 giant creature costing 4 and a red with the ability of Menace. Forcing 2 creatures to block is nice, allowing for other things to get through as needed. However, this creature's adventure is what earns it a bigger spot into this deck. Twice the Rage is an instant speed spell costing 1 and a red. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. Being able to do double strike is nice, but an instant speed is so much nicer. Especially when it already has a high enough power, or you needed that little extra punch to put an opposing creature down. And finally, we come to a pair of copies of Gingerbread Hunter, a 5/5 giant creature with summoning cost of 4 and a green. This creature's ability has it enter with a food token. But much like the other giant, this adventure section is what earns it in the spot of the deck. For 2 and a black, Puny Snack is an instant speed that reads, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. A quick hit for 2 at the cost of 3 might be a lot, but when you remember the earlier cards that come in and double this for free, that is perfectly clutch for the win. And needing that extra oomph, it's hard to turn it away. No balanced deck is without its supporting cards to help carry it forward, and this deck has a handful to round it out. Starting with card draw is Thrill of Possibility. Having a pair of these in the deck at the cost of 1 and a red and an instant speed lets you discard 1 card and draw 2. So holding excess land or other cards that don't help in this situation, especially when the deck favors quick small plays, is very nice. The pair of instants making sure that minions come with a hard punch is Lash of Thorns. At the cost of 1 black, target creature gets +2/+1 and gains death touch until end of turn. With the double strike options within, as well as small blockers, this is a pair of nice additions for that surprise tactic. Same with the next pair, Ashnod's Intervention. For a single black at instant speed, this card reads, until end of next turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains whenever this creature dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, return it to the owner's hand. The second part is the biggest key to the approach of this deck. Aside from saving that creature from going away, we're able to call it back our adventure spells and that creature. So we get the full use again of that full card. As well, if necessary, at instant speed, we can protect losing something valuable from our opponents trying to remove our creatures. Knowing an opponent's weakness is just as important as knowing one's own. While this deck certainly lacks height and can't deal with evasive air units easily, having 2 copies of Plummet is nice to have. For 1 and a green, this instant lets you destroy target creature with flying. While only 2 in the deck might seem low, the plan for this deck is to bring the flyers down to stop the problem we are going to be. But having 2 cards in back pocket for the bigger threats is also a safety measure. Same with the 2 cards of Naturalize included in here. For 1 and a green, we can destroy a target artifact or enchantment. just in case our opponents have pesky items that need to be removed. Finally, in the spell category, we have a single copy of Virtue of Strength. This enchantment does come in at a hefty cost of 5 and 2 green, but it reads, if you tap a basic land for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. While our opening cards of Lucky Clover and Edgewall Innkeeper, our plans to constantly play through our deck to overwhelm our opposition is key. But more importantly is the adventure spell that comes with this enchantment. At sorcery speed for 1 green, you can cast Garenbrig Growth. This spell reads, return target creature or land from your graveyard to your hand. The sooner we are able to play this, the better. Adventure cards are played and then put into exile. Having them there makes it much harder for our opponents to take these cards away from us. Though they do become aware of the spell potential to return to the field, it's better than having them make you discard and miss out playing this power play later in the game. Lastly, we come to the lands for this deck. Typically when it comes to most of my deck builds, for every 2 spell cards, I put in 1 mana. There are at times exceptions with mana rocks or spell costs, but typically a perfect third is my aim on building decks. When it comes to the Adventures in Eldraine, this falls perfectly into that normal territory for my builds, as I plan to rapid fire spells and want the most mana there to utilize. As well, because I have mostly balanced out the color variety within, I have done the same for the mana. 7 basic forests, 6 basic swamps, 6 basic mountains, and a single specialty land. Usually when it comes to my vintage decks, when they are multicolored, I usually include fetch lands like Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse, so I can better mana balance. But in this instance, I decided to forgo the fetch lands and include Gateway Plaza. This land enters tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you pay 1 mana. The benefit is that you are able to tap this land for any 1 color. To me, this card is a low cost to pay for 3 mana potential. And with the enchantment Virtue of Strength, I didn't want too many filler mana. This deck runs at a perfectly 60 cards, which honestly is not normal, as I typically go 72 with a vintage deck. Before I finalize any deck build, I always do play a few test draws just to be sure that I have a consistent playable opening hand, and not needing to make mulligans multiple times over. And this so far has shown to be very consistent with quick plays as expected. As you can see on the right side with the running total, we have the value right here. This is also including at basic lands, priced at 3 cents per piece. If you have any suggestions that you can think for this deck, please put in the comments below, as I'm always interested to see what kind of card combinations are out there. But half the fun of building a deck is also playing it. If you'd like to see how this deck plays out, hit that like button and subscribe, as one of our future videos will be the playthrough of this deck against one of our friends from the Archive Couch, our sister channel, where we play through a variety of classic games ranging from the NES all the way up to the PS4. So join us again later at the table for another video from the Archive Magic. Catch y'all later.